The dust settled on the makeshift grave as Zara Daniels placed the last stone on the mound, her dress stained with dirt, and her heart heavy with a grief that never seemed to diminish no matter how many years passed. She stood slowly, brushing off her hands on her apron, and surveyed the small cemetery at the edge of Las Cruces, New Mexico territory. It was 1878, and death was as common as tumbleweeds in this unforgiving land. Most folks avoided this place, believing it cursed or at least unlucky to linger among the dead. But Zara came here every day without fail, tending to graves that belonged to strangers and loved ones alike. She pulled weeds, straightened crosses, and whispered prayers over the forgotten souls who had no one else to remember them. The sun blazed overhead, typical for late August, and sweat trickled down her spine. She was 24 years old, though sometimes she felt ancient. Her father had been the undertaker before consumption took him 3 years ago, and her mother had died giving birth to Zara herself. The cemetery had become her inheritance, her purpose, and her prison all at once. She moved between the graves with practiced efficiency, her long dark braids swinging behind her. Most of the townspeople thought her strange. Women were supposed to marry, have children, and keep house. Instead, Zara lived alone in the small cottage near the cemetery gates and spent her days among the dead. The few marriage proposals she had received came from men who saw her property and modest savings, not the woman herself. She had refused them all. As she knelt beside a newer grave, pulling away dried grass, she heard the unmistakable sound of hoofbeats. Visitors were rare this time of day. Most people came early morning or near dusk, as if the full light of day made their grief too exposed. She glanced up, shading her eyes against the sun, and saw a rider approaching on a paint horse. The man dismounted with easy grace, and even from a distance, Zara could tell he was a cowboy through and through. His boots were worn but well maintained, his hat tilted just so, and he moved with the slight bow-legged gait of someone who spent more time in the saddle than on foot. What caught her attention most, however, was the bundle of wildflowers he carried in his left hand. He walked through the cemetery gates, removing his hat respectfully, and she saw his face clearly for the first time. He was young, perhaps her own age or close to it, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. A few days' worth of stubble covered his jaw, and his dark hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar. "Afternoon, miss," he said, his voice carrying a gentle Texas drawl. "I am looking for the grave of Samuel Chen. Would you know where I might find it?" Zara stood, brushing dirt from her dress. Samuel Chen had been buried 2 months prior, a railroad worker who had died in an accident. She had been the only one at his burial besides the minister. "Follow me," she said simply. She led him to the eastern section of the cemetery, where a simple wooden marker bore Samuel's name. The cowboy stood silently for a moment, then knelt and placed the wildflowers against the grave. His movements were reverent, and Zara saw a genuine sorrow cross his features. He was a friend. She asked softly. The cowboy nodded, still kneeling. "More than that. He saved my life 2 years back. We were both working on a cattle drive, and I got thrown from my horse during a stampede. Sam rode straight into danger and pulled me out. I have been on the trail for months, and when I finally got word he had passed, I came as soon as I could." There was something raw in his voice that made Zara's heart clench. She knew that kind of guilt, the weight of being unable to say goodbye. "He had a peaceful burial," she offered. "I made sure of it. There were not many in attendance, but he was treated with respect." The cowboy looked up at her, and she saw surprise in his eyes. "You were there. I attend all the burials here. Someone should bear witness when a soul passes on." Samuel seemed like a good man, even though I never knew him in life. He stood slowly, dusting off his knees. That is a kindness most would not bother with. He extended his hand. Ryder Ferguson. Most folks call me Ryder. She shook his hand, noting the calluses and the strength in his grip. Zara Daniels, I tend these graves. I can see that. The place looks well cared for. Back in Texas, most cemeteries look like no one has touched them in years. He glanced around, taking in the neat rows, the absence of weeds, the small touches that spoke of constant attention. You do this alone? I do. It was my father's work before me, and now it is mine. Ryder settled his hat back on his head, but he did not move toward his horse. Instead, he looked back at Samuel's grave. Would you mind if I stayed a spell? I have some things I would like to say, but I do not want to keep you from your work. Stay as long as you need, Zara said. She returned to her tasks, giving him privacy, but she found herself acutely aware of his presence. She could hear him talking softly to the grave, his words too low to make out but the emotion clear in his tone. An hour passed, and the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Zara finished her rounds and gathered her tools. When she looked up, Ryder was leaning against Samuel's grave marker, his hat in his hands, staring at nothing in particular. She approached quietly. I am heading back now. The gates stay open, but most folks prefer not to be here after dark. Ryder nodded and pushed himself upright. Thank you for letting me stay, and for caring for Sam's grave. It means more than you might think. Something in his expression made her speak before she could think better of it. You are welcome to visit whenever you like. I am here every day from sunrise to sunset. He met her eyes, and a slow smile spread across his face. It transformed him, chasing away the sorrow and revealing someone younger, lighter. I might just take you up on that, Miss Daniels. They walked together to the gates, and Zara watched as he mounted his horse. He tipped his hat to her and rode toward town, dust rising in his wake. She stood there longer than necessary, telling herself it was just to ensure he found the road properly, but knowing she was lying to herself. That night in her small cottage, Zara found herself thinking about Ryder Ferguson. It had been a long time since anyone had looked at her with anything other than pity or suspicion. The women in town thought her unnatural, and the men either wanted to marry her for convenience or stayed far away, as if death was contagious. But Ryder had looked at her like she was simply a person, doing a job that mattered. She told herself not to be foolish. He was a drifter, a cowboy who would move on to the next job, the next town. Men like that did not settle down, especially not with strange women who lived in cemeteries. But as she lay in bed, listening to the coyotes howl in the distance, she could not shake the memory of his smile. The next morning, Zara rose with the dawn as always and made her way to the cemetery. The desert air was still cool, a brief respite before the heat of the day set in. She went about her usual routine, checking for damage from the night's winds, refilling the water basin near the entrance for visitors, and beginning her rounds of each grave. She was fixing a tilted cross when she heard hoofbeats again. Her heart jumped, though she told herself it could be anyone. But when she turned, there was Ryder, dismounting with another bundle of wildflowers in his hand. "Morning, Miss Daniels," he called out, his voice cheerful. "Thought I would visit Sam again if that is all right." "Of course," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You do not need to ask permission." He walked to Samuel's grave and placed the fresh flowers next to yesterday's bouquet, which was already wilting in the heat. Then, to her surprise, he did not settle in for a solitary vigil. Instead, he walked over to where she was working. "Need any help?" he asked. Zara blinked. "Help? Well, I have got some time before I need to be anywhere, and it looks like you could use an extra pair of hands. That cross there is leaning something fierce." She hesitated. She had never had help before, had never wanted it. This was her domain, her responsibility. But there was something genuine in his offer, and the cross really was giving her trouble. The ground had shifted, and she had been trying to dig it out and reset it properly for days. "All right," she said finally, "if you are sure you do not mind." Ryder grinned and rolled up his sleeves. "Point me in the right direction." They worked together for the next 2 hours, and Zara found herself relaxing in his presence. Ryder did not talk much while he worked, but when he did, his words were thoughtful. He told her about his time on the trail, about the stars in Texas that seemed bigger than anywhere else, about the cattle drives and the cowboys he had worked with. He talked about Samuel, about how the man had been quiet but dependable, always the first to volunteer for the difficult jobs. In turn, Zara found herself sharing things she rarely spoke about. She told him about her father, about learning the undertaker's trade at his side, about the loneliness of being the only one who seemed to care about the dead. She told him about the graves she tended, the stories she had pieced together from tombstones and town gossip. "This one," she said, gesturing to a small grave with a lamb carved into the marker, "was a little girl named Patience. She died of scarlet fever when she was 6. Her parents moved away a year later, too heartbroken to stay. But I make sure there are always flowers here in spring." Ryder looked at the grave, his expression somber. "You have got a good heart, Miss Daniels." She felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Someone has to remember them." "Maybe so, but most people would not bother. They would say it is not their concern or that the dead do not care either way. But I think you are right. I think it matters." They worked until the sun was high overhead, and Zara realized with a start that she had lost track of time. She never lost track of time. Her days were measured and predictable, each hour accounted for. But with Ryder there, talking and working beside her, the time had slipped away like water. "I should let you get on with your day," Ryder said, as if reading her thoughts. "I have taken up enough of your time." "You helped more than you hindered," Zara said honestly. "The work went faster with 2. He smiled, and again she saw that transformation, the way his whole face changed. "Then maybe I will come back tomorrow, if you do not mind the company." She should say no. She should maintain her solitude, her careful distance from the world. But instead she heard herself say, "I would not mind at all." True to his word, Ryder returned the next day, and the day after that. Each time he brought fresh flowers for Samuel's grave, and each time he stayed to help Zara with her work. They fell into an easy rhythm, and the cemetery began to look better than it had in years. Together, they repaired fences, straightened markers, and cleared away the persistent desert scrub that threatened to overrun everything. But more than the physical help, Zara found herself looking forward to their conversations. Ryder had a way of drawing her out, of asking questions that made her think about things she had long stopped questioning. Why did she do this work? What did she want from life? Had she ever thought about leaving Las Cruces? "Sometimes," she admitted one afternoon as they rested in the shade of the cemetery's lone tree. "When I was younger, I thought about going east, maybe becoming a teacher. But then my father got sick and there was no one else to do this work." "It is not too late," Ryder said. "You are still young. 24 is not so young out here. Most women my age have 3 or 4 children already." "Is that what you want? Husband and children?" It was a blunt question, but Ryder had a way of being direct without being rude. Zara considered it carefully. "I used to think so. But the men who have proposed wanted a housekeeper or a mother for children they already had. None of them wanted me." "Then they were fools," Ryder said quietly. She looked at him, startled by the intensity in his voice. He was staring out at the desert, his jaw tight, and she realized with a jolt that he was angry on her behalf. I do not think I am made for that life anyway, she said softly. I am too strange, too comfortable with death. What man wants a wife who spends her days in a cemetery? Ryder turned to her, and his gray eyes were serious. A smart one, I would think. Someone who can see past convention to the woman underneath. Someone who appreciates dedication and kindness and strength. Her breath caught. There was something in the way he looked at her, something that made her heart race and her hands tremble. She had been alone so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be seen, truly seen by another person. Before she could respond, a voice called out from the cemetery gates. Zara. Zara Daniels, she stood quickly, recognizing the voice of Martha Hendricks, one of the few women in town who spoke to her with any kindness. Martha was rushing through the graves, her face flushed with exertion. Zara, thank goodness. I need your help. My mother passed this morning and I do not know what to do. The undertaker in town says he is too busy, and I do not have the money he is asking anyway. Zara moved immediately into action, her personal feelings pushed aside. This was her job, her calling. I will come right away. Where is she now? At the house. I did not know who else to ask. You did right in coming to me. Let me get my supplies. Ryder stood as well. I will come with you. You might need help moving her. Martha looked at him uncertainly, but Zara nodded. This is Ryder Ferguson. He has been helping me here. If you are comfortable with it, his assistance would be appreciated. They went to Martha's small house on the outskirts of town, where her mother lay in a narrow bed, her face peaceful in death. She had been elderly, and Martha said she had simply not woken that morning. A peaceful passing, as much as any death could be. Zara had learned the rituals of death from her father, and she moved through them with practiced efficiency. She washed the body with care and respect, dressed her in the best dress Martha had, and prepared her for burial. Ryder helped without being asked, lifting when needed, fetching water and standing back when appropriate. Martha watched with tears streaming down her face. Thank you, she whispered. I could not have done this alone. You are not alone, Zara said gently. Tomorrow, we will lay her to rest properly. They worked until evening, and by the time they had finished, the body was prepared and laid out respectfully in Martha's front room. Neighbors had begun to arrive, bringing food and condolences, as was the custom. Zara and Ryder slipped away quietly, walking back toward the cemetery in the fading light. They did not speak for a long while, and Zara appreciated the silence. Death was never easy, even when expected, and she always felt drained after preparing a body. You are good at that, Ryder said finally. Gentle. You made it easier for her daughter. It is what my father taught me. Death is hard enough without making it worse through carelessness or haste. They reached the cemetery gates, and Zara realized that Ryder's horse was still tied there from the morning. The day had stretched long, and the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple. I should get back to town, Ryder said, but he did not move toward his horse. Instead, he stood looking at her, his expression unreadable in the growing darkness. Where are you staying? Zara asked, suddenly curious. I have seen you here every day, but I do not know where you go at night. There is a boarding house on Main Street. Mrs. Patterson runs it. The room is small, but it is clean and cheap. Are you working anywhere? Ranching, I mean. He shook his head. Not right now. I did some work at the Miller Ranch for a few weeks when I first arrived, but I have been helping you mostly. I have some money saved from the last cattle drive. You should not be spending your savings just to help me, Zara said, alarmed. I cannot pay you. I am not asking for pay. His voice was firm. I am doing this because I want to, because it matters, because you matter. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Zara's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. Ryder, I know I should not say things like that, he interrupted. I know we have only known each other a week, but I have never met anyone like you, Zara. You are not afraid of hard work or death or being alone. You do what needs doing without complaint or expectation of reward. That is rare. You are rare. She could not speak. No one had ever said such things to her. She had been the strange girl, the lonely woman, the one people whispered about. But Ryder saw her differently, and it was both terrifying and exhilarating. I do not know what to say, she admitted. You do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know I will be back tomorrow if you want me here. I do, she said quickly. Want you here, I mean. Your help has been invaluable. He smiled, and even in the dim light she could see the warmth in it. Good. Then I will see you in the morning, Miss Daniels. Zara, she said impulsively. You should call me Zara. Zara, he repeated, and the way he said her name made something flutter in her chest. I will see you tomorrow, Zara. He rode off into the night, and Zara walked slowly to her cottage. Her mind was spinning, and she could not seem to settle her thoughts. She heated up leftover stew for dinner but barely tasted it. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ryder's face, heard his words. You matter. That night she barely slept. She kept replaying their conversations, analyzing every word, every look. She was being foolish, she told herself. He was being kind, nothing more. Men did not fall for women like her. But there had been something in his eyes, something that made her hope despite her better judgment. The next morning, she was up even earlier than usual, taking extra care with her appearance. She brushed her hair until it shone and braided it carefully. She wore her better dress, the blue one with the white collar that her father had given her before he died. She told herself it was not for Ryder, that she simply felt like dressing nicely, but she knew she was lying. He arrived just as the sun cleared the horizon, and the smile he gave her when he saw her made all her nervous preparation worthwhile. Morning, Zara. You look real pretty today. She blushed. Thank you. We have a burial this afternoon for Martha's mother. I thought I should look presentable. You always look presentable. Today you look beautiful. She did not know how to respond to that, so she changed the subject, leading him to the spot she had prepared for the new grave. They worked together to dig it, the early morning cool making the task bearable. As they worked, they talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Texas, the youngest of 5 children. She told him about her lonely childhood, her mother's death, and her father's determination to teach her a trade so she would never be dependent on anyone. He sounds like a good man, Ryder said, pausing to wipe sweat from his forehead. He was. Practical, sometimes stern, but he loved me in his way. He made sure I could take care of myself. I wish I could have met him. I think we would have gotten along. The thought of Ryder meeting her father made something warm bloom in Zara's chest. It implied a future, a continuation of whatever was developing between them. She did not let herself think too hard about it, afraid to jinx the fragile connection they were building. By afternoon, the grave was ready, and people began to arrive for the burial. Martha came with her family, and to Zara's surprise, a fair number of townspeople showed up as well. Martha's mother had been well liked, it seemed. Reverend Thompson conducted the service, his words familiar and comforting. Zara stood to the side, as she always did during burials, her head bowed respectfully. But she was aware of Ryder standing beside her, a solid presence that made her feel less alone. After the service, as people dispersed, Martha approached them. Thank you both, for everything. I do not know what I would have done without your help. I am glad I could be there, Zara said sincerely. Martha glanced at Ryder, then back at Zara, and a knowing smile crossed her face. It is good to see you with someone, Zara. You have been alone too long. Before Zara could protest that it was not like that, Martha had moved away to speak with other mourners. Zara felt her face heat with embarrassment, but when she glanced at Ryder, he was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "She is not wrong," he said quietly. "You have been alone too long." "And what about you?" Zara asked, finding her courage. "You are a drifter, moving from town to town. Is that not a kind of loneliness too?" He was quiet for a moment, watching the last of the mourners leave. "It is. I used to think I liked it, the freedom of not being tied down. But lately, I have been wondering if maybe I was just running from something." "What were you running from?" "Responsibility, maybe. Or the fear of settling down and finding out I was not good enough. My father was a hard man, never satisfied with anything I did. I left home at 16 and have been moving ever since. But now, being here helping you, I am starting to think maybe staying in one place would not be so bad." "Las Cruces is not a bad town," Zara said carefully, hardly daring to hope. "There are ranches nearby always looking for good workers. And the railroad is expanding. There are opportunities for a man willing to work." "Are you trying to convince me to stay, Zara Daniels?" She met his eyes. "Maybe I am." He moved closer, and suddenly the space between them felt charged with possibility. "And if I did stay, what then?" "Then maybe you would not have to spend your savings on a boarding house room, and maybe I would not have to tend these graves alone. And maybe," he said, his voice dropping lower, "we could see where this thing between us goes. Because there is something here, Zara. You feel it too, do not you?" She nodded, unable to speak around the lump in her throat. She did feel it, this pull toward him, this connection that had formed so quickly it should have frightened her but somehow did not. Ryder reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused, and his fingers wrapped around hers with a gentleness that made her eyes sting with unexpected tears. "I would like to court you properly," he said, "if you would allow it. I know I am just a cowboy without much to my name, but I am a hard worker and I would treat you right, better than those fools who could not see what they had right in front of them." "You are not just a cowboy," Zara said fiercely. "You are kind and thoughtful, and you see me, really see me. No one has ever done that before." "Then is that a yes?" She laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised her. When was the last time she had laughed like that? "Yes. Yes, Ryder Ferguson, you may court me." He grinned, that transformation happening again, and squeezed her hand. "Good. Then how about we start with dinner tonight? There is a restaurant in town, nothing fancy, but the food is decent. I would like that." They stood there for a moment longer, hands clasped, smiling at each other like fools. Around them, the cemetery was quiet, the dead resting peacefully in their plots. But for Zara, surrounded by death as she was, she had never felt more alive. That evening, Ryder came to collect her at sunset, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt. Zara had changed into her Sunday dress, a deep green that brought out the color of her eyes. They walked together into town, and if people stared or whispered, Zara found she did not care. Let them talk. She was happy. The restaurant was small but clean, and they sat at a corner table away from the other diners. They ordered roast chicken and vegetables, and as they ate, the conversation flowed easily. Ryder told her more about his travels, about the places he had seen and the people he had met. She told him about the books she read in her spare time, borrowed from the traveling library that came through every few months. "What kind of books do you like?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Stories, mostly. Adventures and romances." "I know it is foolish, but I like reading about places I will never go and people braver than I am." "You are brave," Ryder said firmly. "It takes courage to do what you do, to stand against convention and do what you know is right. I do not feel brave. Most days I just feel tired." "That is because you are doing it alone, but you do not have to anymore, Zara. I am here now, and I am not going anywhere. It was a promise, and she believed him. Over the next several weeks, they fell into a pattern. Ryder would arrive at the cemetery each morning, and they would work together throughout the day. Sometimes they talked, and sometimes they worked in comfortable silence. He began to learn the stories of the graves as well as she knew them, and he started bringing flowers not just for Samuel, but for the forgotten graves, the ones with no family to remember them. In the evenings, he would walk her back to her cottage, and they would sit on her small porch, watching the stars come out and talking about everything and nothing. He told her about his dreams of one day owning a small ranch, just enough land for some cattle and horses. She told him about her dream of expanding the cemetery, of making it a place of beauty instead of just a necessity. "We could do that together," he said one night. "If you wanted, I could help you. We could make this place something special." "I would like that," she admitted. "I have always wanted to plant trees, maybe some flowers, make it less harsh." "Then we will. Whatever you want, Zara." He kissed her for the first time that night, a gentle press of lips that made her heart soar. It was sweet and chaste, but it held the promise of more. When he pulled away, his eyes were warm. "I am falling in love with you," he said simply. "I thought you should know." "I am falling in love with you too," she whispered back. From that night on, things shifted between them. There was a new intimacy, a certainty that this was real and lasting. Ryder took a job at the Miller Ranch, working cattle and saving money. He spoke of the future with confidence, of building a life together. But not everyone was happy about their courtship. The town gossips had plenty to say about the strange cemetery woman and her drifter cowboy. Some said he was after her property, small as it was. Others said she was making a fool of herself, falling for a man who would leave as soon as he got bored. One afternoon, about 2 months after Ryder had first arrived, Zara was working alone in the cemetery when she heard raised voices. She looked up to see a group of women from town approaching, led by Constance Whitmore, the banker's wife and the most influential woman in Las Cruces. "Miss Daniels," Constance said, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "We need to have a word with you." Zara stood, brushing dirt from her hands. "Mrs. Whitmore, ladies, what can I do for you?" "It is about this inappropriate relationship you have developed with that cowboy. People are talking, and it reflects poorly on the town to have our cemetery keeper carrying on with a vagrant." Zara felt her temper rise. Ryder Ferguson is not a vagrant. He is a working man with a job at the Miller Ranch, and our relationship is none of your concern. "It is our concern when you are representing this community," another woman chimed in. "You are unmarried and spending time alone with a man. It is improper." "I am 24 years old and perfectly capable of making my own decisions," Zara said firmly. "I appreciate your concern, but it is misplaced." "You are being foolish," Constance said sharply. "Men like that do not settle down. He will use you and leave you ruined. Think of your reputation." "My reputation?" Zara laughed bitterly. "I have never had a reputation in this town beyond being the strange woman who lives with the dead. None of you have ever cared about me before. Why start now?" The women exchanged glances, clearly not expecting her to fight back. Constance drew herself up. "We are trying to help you, to save you from making a terrible mistake." "The only mistake I made was caring what people like you think," Zara said. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have work to do." She turned her back on them, her hands shaking with anger and adrenaline. She heard them muttering among themselves, but eventually they left. She stood among the graves, breathing hard, trying to calm herself. That evening, when Ryder arrived, she told him what had happened. His face darkened with anger. "They had no right to speak to you that way. They think they are protecting me, or protecting the town's morals. It does not matter. It matters if it hurts you." She touched his face gently. The only thing that would hurt me is if you left. Everything else is just noise. He caught her hand and kissed her palm. I am not leaving, Zara, I told you that. I am going to marry you if you will have me, and then they will have nothing to gossip about. Her breath caught. Marry me. Is it too soon? I know we have only known each other a few months, but I am sure. I have never been more sure of anything. I love you, Zara. I want to spend my life with you, working beside you, building something together. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but they were happy tears. Yes, yes, I will marry you. He kissed her then, not gently this time, but with passion and promise. When they broke apart, both were breathless. I do not have a ring yet, he said. I have been saving, but it will take a few more weeks. I do not need a ring, I just need you. You will have both, I promise. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church. Martha stood up for Zara, and one of Ryder's co-workers from the ranch stood up for him. The church was only half full, and most of the attendees were people they had helped over the months, families of the dead they had tended together. Constance Whitmore and her friends were notably absent, but Zara found she did not care. As she stood beside Ryder, wearing a simple white dress that Martha had helped her make and spoke her vows, she was happier than she had ever been. I promise to love you, to stand beside you, and to share this life with you, whatever may come, she said, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. I promise to cherish you, to support you, and to never let you feel alone again, Ryder said, his gray eyes locked on hers. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Ryder kissed her, the small crowd cheered. They were married, officially and irrevocably bound together. They held a small reception at Zara's cottage, which was now their cottage. It was modest, but there was food and laughter, and for the first time in years, Zara felt like she belonged to something larger than herself. That night, alone together for the first time as husband and wife, Ryder carried her over the threshold of the cottage. They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies with patience and care. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Zara felt a peace she had never known. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too, Ryder murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. Always. Life settled into a new rhythm after their marriage. Ryder continued working at the ranch, but spent every free moment with Zara at the cemetery. Together, they began to transform it. Using Ryder's wages and the small fees Zara charged for her services, they bought young trees and planted them throughout the cemetery. They ordered seeds for wildflowers and created small garden plots around the graves. The work was hard, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. The cemetery began to change, becoming less a place of death and more a place of remembrance and peace. People started to notice. Families who had avoided visiting their loved ones' graves began to come more often, drawn by the beauty Zara and Ryder were creating. One afternoon, nearly a year after they married, the mayor of Las Cruces came to visit. He was a portly man who rarely ventured far from his office, and his presence was surprising. Mr. and Mrs. Ferguson, he said, removing his hat respectfully. I've come to make a proposition. Zara and Ryder exchanged glances. What kind of proposition? Ryder asked. The town council has been discussing the cemetery. We can all see the improvements you have made, and people are talking about how well maintained it is. We would like to make this an official town cemetery, with you two as the official caretakers. There would be a salary attached, and funding for continued improvements. Zara's heart leaped. This was more than she had ever hoped for. Official recognition and financial stability to continue their work. What would be expected of us? Continue what you are doing. Maintain the grounds, prepare the deceased for burial, keep records. The town would provide a budget for supplies and maintenance. and we would like to expand the cemetery to the east, adding more plots for the growing population. Ryder looked at Zara, letting her make the decision. This was her domain, her passion. She nodded. "We accept." "Thank you, Mayor," the mayor smiled. "Thank you. You have done this town a service, Mrs. Ferguson, more than you know. This place used to be a disgrace. Now it is something we can be proud of." After he left, Zara and Ryder stood together, looking out over the cemetery. It was late spring, and the trees they had planted were beginning to fill out. Wildflowers bloomed between the graves, adding splashes of color to the weathered stone and wood. "We did this," Zara said wonderingly. "Together we made something beautiful." "You made it beautiful," Ryder corrected. "I just helped. This was always your vision. But I could not have done it without you. Before you came, I was just surviving. You showed me how to live again." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and she leaned into his warmth. They stood like that for a long time, watching the sun set over the graves, over their life's work. That evening, as they returned to their cottage, Zara had news of her own to share. She had been waiting for the right moment, nervous about how Ryder would react. But standing in their small kitchen, with the lamplight casting warm shadows, she found her courage. "Ryder, there is something I need to tell you." He looked up from stoking the fire, concerned by her tone. "What is it? Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I am just nervous. I do not know how you will feel about this." He came to her immediately, taking her hands. "Whatever it is, we will face it together. Just tell me." She took a deep breath. "I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he just stared at her, and her heart sank. Maybe he was not ready. Maybe he did not want children yet. But then a smile broke across his face, so wide and bright it made her breathless. "A baby. We are having a baby," she nodded, tears springing to her eyes. "Yes, in about 6 months, I think." He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around. When he set her down, he was laughing and crying at the same time. "I am going to be a father. We are going to be parents." "You are happy?" she asked, needing to hear it. "Happy, Zara, I am beyond happy. I am thrilled. Terrified, but thrilled. This is everything I ever wanted." He kissed her deeply, and when they broke apart, they were both grinning like fools. "We should celebrate," he said. "We should rest," she countered. "I have been so tired lately. I did not understand why until I realized what it meant." "Then rest it is. Come on, let me take care of you." He led her to bed and tucked her in like she was made of glass. She laughed at his sudden gentleness. "I am pregnant, not made of porcelain. I am not going to break." "I know, but let me fuss. I have never done this before, and I want to do it right." "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said softly. "I hope so. I want to be nothing like my own father. I want our child to grow up knowing they are loved no matter what." "They will," Zara promised. "With you as their father, they will never doubt it." The pregnancy was not easy. The desert heat was brutal that summer, and Zara struggled with exhaustion and sickness. But Ryder was there every step of the way, taking over more of the physical work at the cemetery, making sure she rested, bringing her water and food even when she could not keep it down. The women of the town, some of whom had snubbed her before, began to soften. Pregnancy was a universal experience, and slowly, cautiously, some of them reached out with advice and offers of help. Martha became a frequent visitor, bringing meals and sitting with Zara on the difficult days. "You are glowing," Martha said one afternoon, watching Zara work on a new flower bed near the cemetery entrance. Her belly was just starting to show, a small bump beneath her dress. "I am sweating," Zara corrected, wiping her forehead. "Glowing is what people say when they mean you look terrible but do not want to be rude," Martha laughed. "Well, you look happy at least. Marriage agrees with you. Motherhood will too." "I hope so. I am terrified I will be terrible at it. I never knew my mother, and I have no idea how to raise a child." None of us do, not really, but you have a good heart and you have Ryder. That is more than enough. As the months passed and Zara's belly grew, she found herself dreaming of the future. Would their child be a boy or a girl? Would they have Ryder's gray eyes or her green ones? Would they be strong or gentle or both? Ryder built a cradle during the long winter evenings, carving it carefully from pine. He would not tell her what design he was putting on it, saying it was a surprise. When he finally showed her, tears filled her eyes. He had carved flowers and vines all around it, delicate and beautiful. So our baby will always be surrounded by beauty, just like you made the cemetery beautiful, he explained. It is perfect, she whispered. The baby came in early March, on a night when the desert was cool and the stars blazed overhead. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Zara was sure she could not go on. But Ryder was there, holding her hand, encouraging her, refusing to leave even when the midwife suggested he might be more comfortable waiting outside. "I am not leaving her," he said firmly. "We are in this together." And finally, after hours of pain and effort, their baby was born. A boy, healthy and strong, with a powerful set of lungs that filled the cottage with his cries. "A son," the midwife said, placing the baby in Zara's arms. "Congratulations." Zara looked down at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and perfect, and felt a love so overwhelming it stole her breath. Ryder knelt beside the bed, staring at their son with wonder. "He is beautiful," Ryder said, his voice thick with emotion. "He looks like you." "He looks like us," Zara corrected. "He is ours." They named him Samuel after Ryder's friend, the man whose death had brought them together. It seemed fitting, a way of honoring the past while looking toward the future. Being parents changed everything. The work at the cemetery continued, but now it was punctuated by feeding times and diaper changes, and the thousand small tasks that came with caring for an infant. Ryder proved to be a natural father, patient and loving, willing to wake in the night to walk a fussy baby so Zara could rest. "I never thought I could love anything as much as I love you," Ryder said one night, holding Samuel while the baby slept. "But this little one has stolen my heart completely." "Mine too," Zara agreed. "It is terrifying, is it not? How much you can love someone, terrifying and wonderful all at once." As Samuel grew from an infant to a toddler, he became a fixture in the cemetery. He would toddle between the graves, picking flowers to place on the markers, mimicking his parents' work. People who came to visit their loved ones would smile at the sight of him, this new life among the symbols of death. "He is going to grow up thinking this is normal," Zara said to Ryder one day, watching Samuel carefully water a small flower bed with his toy watering can. "Maybe that is not such a bad thing. Death is a part of life. Better to understand that young than to fear it." "I suppose you are right." He certainly does not seem bothered by it. When Samuel was 3, Zara found herself pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. Ryder was just as attentive, but less panicked, more confident in his ability to care for her. Their second child was a girl, born on a warm summer evening. She had Ryder's gray eyes and Zara's dark hair, and they named her Rose after the wildflowers that now grew throughout the cemetery. With 2 children, life became even busier. The cemetery continued to thrive under their care, and the town council had recently approved funding to add a small chapel on the grounds, a place for funeral services and quiet reflection. Ryder had left his job at the ranch to work full-time with Zara, and together they managed both the cemetery and their growing family. Samuel proved to be a serious child, thoughtful and careful, while Rose was wild and joyful, always laughing. They were opposites in many ways, but they adored each other and their parents. One evening, When Samuel was 7 and Rose was 4, the family sat on the porch of their cottage watching the sunset. The cemetery behind them was peaceful, the trees they had planted now tall enough to provide real shade. Flowers bloomed in every season, carefully tended and lovingly maintained. "Tell us the story again," Samuel asked, as he often did, "about how you and Papa met." Zara glanced at Ryder, who smiled and nodded. This was Samuel's favorite story, the tale of the cowboy who came to visit a grave and stayed to change a life. "Well," Zara began, "I was working in the cemetery, as I did every day, when I heard someone riding up. It was your father, and he was carrying flowers for a friend who had died." "Uncle Sam," Rose chimed in, even though she had never met the man whose name her brother shared. "That is right. Your father placed flowers on the grave and stayed to talk. And then he came back the next day and the day after that. Because he liked you," Samuel said knowingly. "Because he saw something in me that I had not seen in myself," Zara corrected gently. "He helped me see that I was not alone, that I did not have to be." "And then you got married and had us," Rose said, bouncing on Ryder's knee. "And then we got married and had you," Ryder confirmed, kissing the top of Rose's head. "Best decision I ever made." "Staying in Las Cruces?" Zara asked. "Bringing those flowers," he corrected. "Everything else followed from that. One decision that changed my whole life." "Mine too," Zara said softly. As the years continued to pass, the cemetery became known throughout the territory as one of the most beautiful and well-maintained. People came from neighboring towns to see it, to learn how Zara and Ryder had transformed a neglected patch of ground into a place of peace and beauty. Zara began teaching Samuel and Rose about the work, about treating the dead with respect, about the importance of remembering. Samuel took to it naturally, his serious nature well suited to the quiet dignity of the cemetery. Rose was less interested in the work itself, but loved the flowers and the stories each grave held. When Zara was 32, the town council approached them again. They wanted to expand the cemetery even further and add a proper office and workshop. The cemetery had become a source of pride for Las Cruces, and the council wanted to ensure it remained that way for generations to come. "We would like to make this a permanent position," the mayor said. "Something that could be passed down if your children were interested. This place has become part of the town's identity, thanks to you." Zara looked at Ryder, who nodded. They accepted, of course. This work had become their life, their legacy. Knowing it would continue beyond them was more than they had ever hoped for. That night, lying in bed with Ryder's arm around her, Zara reflected on how much her life had changed. 10 years ago, she had been alone, resigned to a life of solitude and quiet grief. Now she had a husband she loved, 2 beautiful children, work that mattered, and a community that had finally learned to accept her. "What are you thinking about?" Ryder asked, sensing she was awake. "How lucky I am. How different my life could have been if you had not come to visit Samuel's grave that day. I am the lucky one. I was just drifting, moving from place to place with no purpose. You gave me a reason to stay, a reason to build something. We built it together. Yes, we did." He pulled her closer and she rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Zara, more now than the day we married, if that is possible." "It is possible. I feel the same way. Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, secure in the knowledge that whatever the future held, they would face it together. The years continued their steady march. Samuel grew into a young man, tall like his father with his mother's serious eyes. At 18, he was already taking on more responsibility at the cemetery, learning the business side of things while maintaining the same care and respect his parents had always shown. Rose, at 15, had decided she wanted to be a teacher. She loved the cemetery and the stories it held, but her passion lay in sharing knowledge with others. Zara and Ryder supported her dreams, knowing that not every child needed to follow in their parents' footsteps. 2 more children had joined the family over the years. Another boy, Daniel, now 10, who was quiet and loved to draw the flowers and trees in the cemetery. And finally, a girl named Grace, just 6 years old, who was fearless and curious about everything. The cottage had been expanded over the years to accommodate the growing family, and the cemetery now covered several acres. The chapel they had built was regularly used for services, and the trees had grown tall and strong, providing shade and beauty. One spring morning, when Zara was 41, she and Ryder stood together at the cemetery gates, watching as a young couple arrived with flowers. The woman was crying softly, and the man had his arm around her shoulders. Zara recognized them as townspeople, though she did not know them well. They watched as the couple made their way to a grave in the newer section, a child who had died of pneumonia over the winter. It was always hard when a child died, a reminder of how fragile life could be. But as Zara watched, she saw the couple pause and look around, taking in the flowers and trees, the careful maintenance, the sense of peace that permeated the space. The woman's tears slowed, and she said something to her husband, gesturing to the beauty around them. "That is why we do this," Zara said softly to Ryder, "to give people a place where they can grieve but also remember with love." "You have done that," Ryder said. "This place heals people. I have seen it over and over again." "We have done it," Zara corrected. "I could never have accomplished this alone." He took her hand, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching over the place they had built, the life they had created. That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner, a chaotic affair with 5 people talking at once, and the younger children trying to sneak extra bread before the meal was served. Zara looked around the table at the faces of the people she loved most in the world and felt a contentment so deep, it was almost painful. After dinner, when the children had scattered to their various activities, Ryder pulled Zara onto the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that rivaled any flower in the cemetery. "You remember our first sunset together?" Ryder asked. "When I first told you I was falling in love with you, of course I remember. I was terrified and thrilled all at once." "So was I. I had never felt that way about anyone before. I was not sure you would feel the same." "How could I not? You saw me when everyone else looked through me. You valued my work when others thought it strange. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable." "You were never unlovable, Zara. You just needed someone who understood you. I am glad it was me. So am I. Every single day I am grateful that you brought those flowers to Samuel's grave." He kissed her, sweet and familiar, a kiss that held 20 years of love and commitment. When they broke apart, they settled into the porch swing that Ryder had built years ago, moving gently back and forth, watching the stars emerge. Inside, they could hear their children laughing and arguing and living. Beyond, the cemetery stood quiet and peaceful, a testament to love and dedication and the belief that every life mattered, even after death. Zara leaned against Ryder's shoulder, feeling his warmth, his steadiness. This was not the life she had imagined for herself all those years ago when she was alone and convinced she would always be that way. This was better. This was everything. "Happy?" Ryder asked, as he often did. "Happy," she confirmed. "More than I ever thought possible." And it was true. In a life surrounded by death, she had found more life, more love, more joy than she had ever dreamed. All because a cowboy had brought flowers to a grave and stayed to talk to a lonely woman who tended the dead. the years continued as they always do. Samuel took over more of the cemetery's daily operations, eventually marrying a kind schoolteacher named Ellen. They gave Zara and Ryder their first grandchild, a little girl named Lily, who had her grandmother's green eyes and her grandfather's easy smile. Rose became a teacher as she had wanted, working at the schoolhouse in town. She married a shopkeeper's son, and they had 3 children who visited the cemetery often, learning the same lessons about respect and remembrance that their mother had learned. Daniel, the artist of the family, moved to Santa Fe to pursue painting but came home regularly, always bringing new sketches of the cemetery, capturing its beauty in ways that made Zara cry. His paintings were sold throughout the territory, and he always made sure to tell people about his parents and the work they did. Grace, the youngest, surprised everyone by becoming a nurse. She had seen too much death in the cemetery, she said, and wanted to fight against it. But she understood the value of her parents' work, the comfort they provided to those left behind. When Zara turned 50, the town threw a celebration in her honor. The cemetery was now considered one of the finest in the entire territory, and people came from as far away as Santa Fe and El Paso to see it. The celebration was held in the cemetery itself, among the trees and flowers that Zara and Ryder had planted over the decades. "I never thought I would see the day when people voluntarily spent time in a cemetery for a party," Zara said to Ryder, watching the festivities with wonder. "You changed what this place means to people. It is not just about death anymore. It is about memory, about beauty, about the continuation of love even after someone is gone." The mayor gave a speech, praising Zara's dedication and vision. Several townspeople shared stories of how the cemetery had helped them through difficult times, how the beauty and peace they found there had aided in their healing. When it was Zara's turn to speak, she stood before the crowd, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. For someone who had spent so many years as an outcast, this acceptance was almost too much to bear. "I did not do this for recognition," she said, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "I did it because it needed to be done, because everyone deserves to be remembered with dignity. Because death is a part of life, and we should not hide from it but embrace it with grace and respect." She paused, finding Ryder in the crowd. "But I could not have done any of this without my husband. He came to this cemetery as a stranger to honor a friend. He stayed because he saw something worth preserving. He has been my partner in this work and in life, and I am grateful every day for his presence." Ryder made his way to her side, and the crowd applauded. He took her hand, and they stood together as they had so many times over the years, united in purpose and love. As Zara grew older, she began to slow down. Her joints ached in the mornings, and the work that had once been easy now left her tired. But Ryder was there, still strong and steady, taking on more of the physical labor while Zara focused on the planning and oversight. Samuel had fully taken over the day-to-day operations by the time Zara was 55, but she still came to the cemetery every day. It was part of her, woven into her identity as firmly as her name. One afternoon, while Zara was planting bulbs for the spring, she heard familiar hoofbeats. She looked up, shading her eyes, and saw a young man riding toward the cemetery. He dismounted at the gates and walked through, carrying a bundle of wildflowers. Zara watched as he made his way to a grave in the newer section. He knelt and placed the flowers carefully, his head bowed. And then, just as Ryder had done so many years ago, he stayed. He sat beside the grave and talked, his voice too low for Zara to hear but the emotion clear in his posture. Eventually, the young man stood and made his way over to where Zara was working. "Excuse me, madam. Are you Mrs. Ferguson?" "I am." Zara said, standing with only a slight wince. "I wanted to thank you. My sister is buried here. She died 2 years ago, and I have been on a cattle drive, could not get back until now. But her grave is beautiful, covered in flowers, well maintained. I was worried it would be neglected, but clearly someone has been caring for it." "That would be my son, Samuel. He tends all the graves here with the same care. Please thank him for me. It means the world to see that she has not been forgotten." As the young man left, Zara felt tears prick her eyes. This was the legacy they were building, not just a beautiful cemetery, but a place where people knew their loved ones would be cared for, remembered, honored. That evening, she told Ryder about the encounter. "It reminded me of you," she said. "Coming to visit a grave and being grateful for the care it received." "The cycle continues," Ryder said. "The work we started is bigger than us now. It will go on long after we are gone." It was a sobering thought, but not a sad one. They had built something lasting, something meaningful. Their love had created not just a family, but a legacy. On their 30th wedding anniversary, Ryder surprised Zara by taking her back to the spot where they had first kissed, beneath the lone tree in the cemetery. The tree was bigger now, its branches spreading wide, providing shade for several graves. "I wanted to remind you of the beginning," he said, "of how far we have come." "I remember every moment," Zara said. "How scared I was to let myself hope, how sure I was that you would leave." "I am never leaving," Ryder said firmly. "Not in this life. You are stuck with me, Zara Ferguson. I would not have it any other way." He pulled out a small box, and Zara gasped. "Ryder, what is this? Open it." Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a small pendant in the shape of a flower. "It is beautiful," she breathed. "Not as beautiful as you. I wanted to give you something to mark 30 years of marriage, of partnership, of love." She turned so he could fasten it around her neck, and then she kissed him deeply. After 30 years, his kiss still made her heart race. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for seeing me, for loving me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for letting me stay," he replied, "for taking a chance on a drifter with nothing to offer but his heart. Your heart was more than enough." They stood beneath the tree as the sun set. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Around them, the cemetery was peaceful, the dead resting easy under the care of the family that loved them. As Zara moved into her 60s, she became less active in the physical maintenance, but remained the heart and soul of the cemetery. She spent her days recording histories, talking to families, and ensuring that every grave had a story attached to it. She began compiling a book, documenting every person buried in the cemetery, their lives and deaths, and the legacies they left behind. Ryder, now in his mid-60s, had finally given up the heavy labor, though he still walked the grounds every day, checking on things, making sure everything was as it should be. They moved slower now, their bodies showing the wear of decades of hard work, but their love remained as strong as ever. Their children had all built successful lives, and their grandchildren numbered in the dozens. Family gatherings were loud, chaotic affairs that filled the cottage to bursting. Zara loved every minute of it, this abundance of life that had sprung from the love she and Ryder shared. One spring morning, when the cemetery was in full bloom and the air was sweet with the scent of flowers, Zara and Ryder walked hand in hand through the paths they had created. They stopped at Samuel Chen's grave, which still received regular flowers even though it was now more than 40 years old. The wooden marker had been replaced long ago with a proper stone, paid for by Ryder. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if you had not come here that day?" Zara asked. "All the time," Ryder admitted. "I think about how close I came to just riding through Las Cruces without stopping. How I almost did not come to pay my respects, because I thought it had been too long that it would not matter. But something made me come. Call it fate or divine intervention or just luck, but something brought me here. I am glad it did. I do not want to imagine my life without you in it. You will never have to. Even after I am gone, I will still be with you. My grave will be here in this place we built together, and you will tend it as you have tended all the others. Do not talk like that, Zara said, though she knew it was inevitable. They were growing old, and death, which had been her companion for so long, would eventually come for them too. It is not morbid, just realistic. I want to be buried here beside you when your time comes. This is our place, Zara. It always has been. She squeezed his hand. Then that is what we will do, together, even in death. They continued their walk, stopping at various graves to check on them, to remember the people buried there. This had been their life's work, this act of remembrance, and Zara felt proud of what they had accomplished. When Zara was 68, Ryder fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away, and within weeks, it had progressed to something more serious. The doctor diagnosed him with pneumonia and said his age made recovery uncertain. Zara nursed him with the same dedication she had shown the cemetery. She barely left his side, sleeping in a chair beside their bed, making sure he took his medicine, holding his hand through the worst of it. Their children came to visit, their faces drawn with worry. Samuel promised to take care of everything at the cemetery. Rose brought food and sat with her mother during the long nights. Daniel sketched his father's face, wanting to capture him as he was. Grace used her nursing skills to make Ryder more comfortable. For 3 weeks, Ryder fought the illness. There were days when it seemed he might recover, when his fever would break and he would seem almost like himself. But then he would relapse, and Zara would watch helplessly as he grew weaker. On a cool evening in October, with the whole family gathered in the cottage, Ryder opened his eyes and looked directly at Zara. His breathing was labored, and she knew the end was near. "My Zara," he whispered, his voice barely audible. She leaned close, tears streaming down her face. "I am here. I am right here. Love you, always loved you. I love you too, so much. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me." He smiled, that beautiful transformation that had captured her heart all those years ago. "Easy choice. You made me whole." His breathing slowed, and Zara held his hand, feeling his pulse grow weaker. Their children gathered around, and in the end, Ryder Ferguson died peacefully, surrounded by the family he loved, in the home he had built with the woman who had changed his life. Zara felt the moment he left, felt his spirit slip away even though his body remained. She sat there for a long time, holding his hand, unwilling to let go. "Mama," Samuel said gently, "we should prepare him." She nodded, knowing it was true. This was what they did, what she had always done. She would prepare Ryder's body with the same care and respect she had shown countless others. It would be the last act of love she could perform for him. Together, she and her children washed Ryder's body and dressed him in his best suit. Zara's hands were steady, even though her heart was breaking. She had tended so many dead over the years, but this was different. This was her husband, her partner, her love. They buried him 3 days later beneath the tree where they had first kissed, in a plot he had chosen years ago. The entire town came to the funeral, more people than Zara had ever seen in the cemetery at one time. Everyone, it seemed, had been touched by Ryder's kindness and generosity. As his casket was lowered into the ground, Zara stood dry-eyed. She had cried all her tears in private. Now, in public, she was composed, dignified, honoring him the way he deserved. After the service, after everyone had left, Zara stayed. She sat beside the fresh grave, her hand on the turned earth, and talked to him as she had talked to him every day of their marriage. "I do not know how to do this without you," she said softly. "For 41 years you have been my constant, my anchor. How do I go on now?" The wind rustled the leaves of the tree, and a bird sang somewhere nearby. The cemetery was peaceful, beautiful, a testament to their shared vision. And in that peace, Zara found her answer. She would go on because the work was not finished, because their legacy needed to be maintained, because he would want her to keep living, to find joy in their children and grandchildren, to continue making this place a haven for those who mourned. She stood slowly, her bones protesting. She was 68 years old and she felt every one of those years, but she was not done yet. There was still work to do, still graves to tend, still lives to remember. Over the next several years, Zara continued her work at the cemetery, though at a much slower pace. Samuel handled most of the physical labor now, but Zara still came every day. She tended Ryder's grave with special care, always making sure there were fresh flowers, always keeping the area immaculate. She finished the book she had been working on, documenting every person buried in the cemetery. It was published by a small press in Santa Fe and became required reading for anyone interested in the history of Las Cruces. Zara donated all the proceeds to the cemetery's maintenance fund. Her grandchildren grew up, and several showed interest in continuing the family business. Lily, Samuel's eldest, was particularly dedicated, learning everything she could from her grandmother about the cemetery and the people buried there. "You have to understand," Zara told her one day as they worked together planting bulbs. "This is not just a job, it is a calling. These people trusted us with their loved ones. We have a responsibility to honor that trust. I understand, Grandma, and I want to do this. I want to carry on what you and Grandpa started." Zara smiled, feeling a sense of peace. The legacy would continue. The cemetery would be cared for long after she was gone. When Zara was 75, she grew ill. Unlike Ryder's sudden decline, hers was gradual. She grew weaker, more tired, less able to do the things she loved. But her mind remained sharp, and she spent her last months surrounded by family, telling stories of the past, of the cemetery, of the cowboy who had brought flowers and changed her life. On a warm evening in May, with the cemetery in full bloom outside her window, Zara gathered her children around her bed. "I want you to promise me something," she said, her voice weak but clear. "Anything, Mama," Rose said, holding her hand. "Promise me you will keep the cemetery beautiful. That you will remember why we did this. It was never about the money or the recognition. It was about honoring people, about ensuring they were not forgotten. Promise me you will continue that." They all promised, tears streaming down their faces. Zara smiled, content. She had lived a good life, a full life. She had known love, deep and true. She had raised children who made her proud. She had built something that would last long after she was gone. That night, Zara dreamed of Ryder. They were young again, standing in the cemetery on the day they first met. He was smiling at her, holding out his hand. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," she replied. She took his hand and together they walked into the light. Zara Daniels Ferguson died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75. She was buried beside Ryder beneath the tree they both loved, in the cemetery they had transformed together. The entire town turned out for her funeral, and people came from all over the territory to pay their respects. Her children and grandchildren continued the work she and Ryder had started. The cemetery remained one of the most beautiful and well-maintained in the Southwest, a living monument to two people who had loved each other and dedicated their lives to honoring the dead. Years later, a young woman came to tend the graves at the edge of town. She was Lily's daughter, Zara's great-granddaughter, named Rosemary after both her great-grandmother's legacy and the flowers that grew throughout the cemetery. She had heard all the stories about her great-grandparents, about the love story that had started with flowers and a conversation. One afternoon, as she worked, a young man rode up on a horse. He dismounted and walked through the gates carrying flowers. Rosemary watched as he made his way to a grave, placed the flowers, and stood there quietly. Eventually, he approached her. "Excuse me, miss. I wanted to thank you for keeping this place so beautiful. I live far away now and I was worried about my father's grave, but I can see it has been well cared for." Rosemary smiled, thinking of her great-grandparents, of the legacy they had built. "That is what we do here. Everyone deserves to be remembered." The young man looked around, taking in the trees and flowers, the peace and beauty of the place. "My name is Thomas," he said. "Would you mind if I stayed a while? I would like to spend some time here, maybe help with some of the work if you need it." Rosemary felt a strange sense of déjà vu, as if history was repeating itself. "I would appreciate the help," she said, "and the company. My name is Rosemary." As they worked together that afternoon, talking and laughing, the spirits of Zara and Ryder seemed to smile down on them from beneath their tree. Love had brought them together in a cemetery all those years ago, and love, it seemed, had a way of blooming even in the places most associated with endings. The cemetery at the edge of Las Cruces, New Mexico, continued to thrive generation after generation, a testament to the power of love, dedication, and the simple act of bringing flowers to honor the dead and staying to talk to the living. And somewhere in whatever comes after, Zara and Ryder walked hand in hand through fields of eternal wildflowers, together as they had always been, as they would always be, forever and always, united in love.